Can I do dark humour on YouTube? Probably. Oh, I've never said that before. And the straw on the camel's back gets broken. I did not say that right. Hey guys, welcome to my new series where I'm going to be talking about all things estrangement, childhood trauma, you know, the fun stuff. Okay, so I'm going to level with you. I am really nervous. This is going to be the first time that I have talked about this in a kind of longer format. I talk a lot on my Instagram and TikTok about estrangement, my experiences, childhood trauma, parentification, all those kind of things. But this will be the first time that I've done it here and it feels a bit exposing, to be honest. But if you would like to see more of my content in a shorter format, then you can find me at Toby and Rue over on Instagram and TikTok. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about my experience of estrangement and how I came to be estranged. But first off, I think probably the most sensible thing to do is to talk about what is estrangement. So when defined by the dictionary, estrangement is the loss of closeness or a relationship with someone, and it can take the form of a friendship, it can take the form of family members, it can be parental estrangement, which is what I'm talking about now, or it can be from a spouse. It can take so many different varieties, but specifically what I am talking about is parental estrangement, which, if I'm honest, is probably the most taboo of them all. It's the one that has the least understanding and the least empathy from strangers and family alike. If I had a penny for every time someone had said to me, but you only get one, mum, I would be a very wealthy lady, because it's so ingrained in us as society to show respect and deference to our parents, regardless of whether they've actually earned it or whether they deserve it. It's really common to stay in a relationship with a parent and to still have contact with them and put it off as, well, it's just the way they are, or, oh well, yeah, I know mum essentially called me fat all weekend over Christmas while I was trying to enjoy my Christmas dinner, but you know what she's like. Actually, would you tolerate it from a partner? Would you tolerate it from a friend? No. So why do we tolerate it from parents? And it took me an awfully long time to get to the point where I realised how toxic my relationship was with my mum, and that I didn't have to tolerate that, and that I could step away from that, and I could create a space for myself that was safer and protected from those experiences. So from my experience, I grew up in what I now can admit to myself and to others was a really toxic relationship with my mum. I always just thought of us as super close, and that was perfectly normal, but actually it was very, very typical of a covert narcissistic mother in a smothering toxic situation. And it's taken me having my own children and realising I don't want to parent them the way that I was parented, and how flawed my relationship was, and the loss of so many relationships myself, to realise quite how bad that relationship was. I never moved out of my childhood home. I remained in my childhood home because I was brought up with the belief that you don't leave your parent, you don't, you know, we should be like we are on the continent, where it's really common for the older family members to live with the newly married couple, or for the whole family to live in one big house together. Think like the Madrigal family in Encanto. Everybody lives together. That's very common, and it works when everybody has their own boundaries. But imagine that with no boundaries. There was a lot in my childhood where I would be told about people who'd put their parents in homes. I can think of examples where so-and-so would put their parent in a home because they had dementia and they were a danger to themselves, and they couldn't give up work in order to look after that person, but they were an awful, awful child, terrible human being, because how could they put their parent in a home? That kind of vibe. So there was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt around the idea of moving out and moving on and having your own family unit. And I remember instances where my mum would turn around to me and say, I can help set you up with a house. And the one time that I took her up on that offer and said, right, okay, so me and Adam are going to move out because we've got the kids now and I think that'd be a good idea, it was hell. Absolute hell. And I was in my early 20s at the time. It was the first time, I didn't go to university, didn't do any of that, and it was the first time that I had expressed a need to move out, have my own space, my own adult family home, and it was crying, "You're abandoning me." And this is built on years and years of being told that this is the worst thing that a daughter could possibly do, and what a betrayal it would be. And I distinctly remember the term "you're abandoning me" being used, and I grew up being terrified of being abandoned, absolutely terrified. It was, my parents separated when I was just before I was 4, and it was always reiterated to me that that was my dad abandoning me. He didn't leave my mum, he left me and my mum. That's a really raw thing to share. To say that to me as an adult, I instantly was like, right, okay, so we can't move out, we can't leave, this is no, I can't do this. And we stayed. And the relationship became increasingly toxic and overbearing, to the point where my mum would need to be involved in everything, to the point where I felt like we couldn't do anything unless it was pre-approved by my mum. It was that kind of, it's actually what I have learnt now, and I can go into this in another video. It is actually what I have learnt to be a covert, narcissistic, smothering mother. And that fits, she is perfect on the dot with that. I still find it really difficult to talk negatively about her. That's how deeply ingrained this is in me. I find like I can feel my chest compressing, because I find it so difficult to acknowledge that she could do anything wrong, because to me she was everything, she was the only thing for so long. And then when other people started to come in my life, I never really noticed how very quickly she would destroy those relationships around me, and she did. Okay, so let's talk about how I became estranged. Now, it's a really common misconception around estrangement that people become estranged through one singular event. It's never one singular event. I've never met anybody or spoken to anybody, and I speak to thousands of people about estrangement, who has had one singular event and gone, do you know what? Don't fancy speaking to you anymore. Not gonna have a relationship with your mum. Thanks for coming. It's built on years of trauma, childhood abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. There'd be so many different things that have been tolerated and accepted, and eventually there might be one event that breaks the camel's back, and that event is not the cause of the estrangement. It is everything that has happened beforehand, and that event has just finally made the person go, I can't do this anymore. So let's talk about my I can't do this anymore experience. We as a couple had been financing the home for a number of years, and previously to that we'd been paying around 50% for everything with my mum. When she retired, we started financing the home completely, bills, her mortgage, everything, but had nothing to show for it. So we'd spoken to mum and said, look, we are at a point now where we would like to own our own house. I don't want to continue like this, because all of our money is going into your house, and we're at a point now where we'd like to have our own house. You do not want us to move out because of what I've discussed previously, with years and years of you're abandoning me, and good children don't leave their home, we should be more like people on the continent, where the older family member lives with the family, that kind of thing. So how about we buy the house at the cost of your mortgage, because mum could no longer afford her mortgage on her own. So it meant two options: we leave and she sells real quick, or we stay, buy the house and build an annex. So we built the house, and we bought the house, and we bought it at a reduced rate. So the house was not sold at asking price of what it would have been to a complete stranger. It was sold at mortgage value, which meant a portion of it was knocked off. So when we took the mortgage, we took extra to make sure that we could build this annex. So we built the annex, and steadily things got worse and worse and worse, with more and more nastiness. The more mum realised that she'd lost control, it would be snide remarks about my dress, snide remarks about what I'd cooked, snide remarks about this, deliberately baiting by telling the kids something that was perhaps racist or homophobic in front of us. I remember one instance, we were sat at the dinner table and mum made a comment about refugees coming across on dinghy boats when we talked about the news that evening, and the kids all sort of looked at us as if to say, that's not what you said. And we said to her, we've asked you not to do that in front of the kids, please don't. So all these small things, these micro things, had built up to the point where we could not live together anymore. And in my damaged, my therapist would say traumatized, I say stupid way, I thought an annex would be the solution. Mum's conditions to that annex were that I buy her a new car, that I pay for everything, she lives rent free, and I have to cook her dinner every night. And I remember telling this to a friend and her just going, what? And I was just like, yeah, but it's what we've agreed, so we're just gonna go with it. She'll be happy. And that's all I wanted, was for her to be happy, but for me to be free. Oh God, that's what it comes down to. I just wanted her to be happy, but I wanted me to be free. Oh, I've never said that before. So we built the annex, and there was a lot of toxic behaviour, and as her control slipped, the nastier things got. So I remember one particular occasion, I hadn't bought her a second TV, and she'd screamed at me across the kitchen in front of all the painters and decorators, one of which took Adam aside and was like, mate, no. Another one who came and put his hand on my shoulder and said, families are complicated, you're not on your own, like, it's okay. And still it never, it twigged. I'd got it at this point how toxic my mum was, but I was so ingrained in me that this is the way a good daughter behaves, and I needed to be a good daughter, and that I owed her everything. I can't tell you how ingrained in me it was to believe that I owed her everything, and I had to pay off this debt to her somehow. And she did that through years and years of telling me that I owed her everything. She eventually moved into the annex. The annex had been built for weeks and weeks, and it took us ages to get her to actually move into it. And when she did, she would do nothing but talk about how much she hated it. She referred to it as the shed. She'd tell the children how unhappy she was in there, how mummy and daddy had forced her out, and steadily it went from toxic comments to relentless. We couldn't be in the same room without it being nasty. And she'd come over every night for dinner, and every night would complain about dinner. Every night I'd done it wrong. Every day there would be something wrong with what I was wearing, how I was behaving, what I'd said online. You know, she would just pick apart everything constantly. So eventually in July of 2020, it came to a head, and I said to her that I needed her to leave, that I needed her to move out. And I'd said to her what I would do was remortgage the house at our expense, obviously, and ensure that she would have been paid the full asking price for the property, and that would set her up for life. She would be able to go and do what she'd always said, which was rent a small place or buy a small place, and she'd be mortgage free, she'd be settled, she'd be good. We'd take the hit for it because, you know, we built the annex, that would be right. And she said no. Her exact words were, I'm not a prostitute that can be paid off. I will be living here and you will stick to your original agreement. And she refused. So what ensued was a 5-month legal battle to get her to move out, with all the extra money that she would have had if she'd have just sold the property anyway. There were lots of comments of, I'm going to drag this out and make you go through court. It will cost you so much money that you'll never recover. And lots of things like that, often in earshot of the children. She would sit outside we'd created like a yard area for her so that she had her own personal space out there to sit outside, and she would sit outside and talk to her sister loudly on the phone right underneath Edith's bedroom window, talking about how me and Adam were dead to her, Edith and Toby were dead to her. There was only Reuben she was interested in, because Reuben was the easiest one for her to manipulate. And we'd asked the children not to go over anymore after she'd sat Edith down and said, will you look at houses with me because mummy's forcing me to leave. And it just snowballed really into this god-awful situation where she didn't want to leave but didn't have a choice, legally didn't have a choice. I carry so much guilt and shame over allowing us to get into that situation, because if I'd just been strong enough to just say no, I'm going to move out, and when she'd offered help, seen it for what it was and said no, you're okay, I'll do it without any help, and not felt like I was either trapped by her help or trapped by her you're abandoning me, I could have made things a lot easier for everyone. Eventually, at the end of December, she moved out. She left the annex pretty trashed. She took everything, all the new furniture we'd bought for her, all of the TVs, electronics, everything that we'd bought for her, she took it all. And all throughout this period, we continued to pay all of her bills, we continued to pay Sky, internet, all of it, so that she wasn't without. And that was it really. She left at the end of December, and I haven't had contact with her since, apart from one occasion where I had to pull up at the bottom of the school gates because she'd come to the school to pull Ruben aside for secret meetings, and we had to come and essentially put a stop to that. So there we have it. That is my experience. That is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and how I ended up at this point. I never wanted to be estranged from my mum. When I asked her to move out, one of the things that I said to her was that when she got settled, we would be able to come and visit and that we could have days out. She chose to completely decimate our relationship to the point where we cannot have contact with each other, where she cannot have contact with my children after the way she's behaved. Instead of just saying, you know what, I'll respect your boundary and I will move out, because that's what should have happened in the first place. It's not working. And it's taken me a long time to go, do you know, that's not on me. That wasn't my choice. My choice was to have a at distance relationship. That was my choice. That was what I wanted. And that was what she wouldn't accept, because ultimately losing control of me and losing money, as she saw it, her free ride, was more of an issue to her than losing her daughter, and that stings, really stings. But that's why I want to talk about estrangement, and why I want to open up about these experiences, because I want people who have been through these experiences, because everybody has a tale of how they became estranged, what was the straw that broke the camel's back in varying degrees, and none of them are pleasant, none of them are nice experiences, and everybody who has been through estrangement or is going through estrangement will have them. And I want people to realise that they are not alone. None of us are alone. It's a lot more common than you think. It's just so shrouded in shame and so taboo, and I'm hoping that by talking about it, because I seek nothing to gain from talking about it other than opening up my own wounds and opening myself up to people going, well, I think you were the bad guy. So I'm hoping that by talking about it and by sharing my lived experiences, I can help you come to terms with yours as well. And that's it. I will be doing another series on this. I'll be doing another episode of this series, if you like. I'm going to do one weekly, and I'll be talking about all sorts of things relating to estrangement and other taboo topics.